morning we're going to make pot roast and for Sunday dinner. Dinner is the noon meal on Sunday, just in case you were curious. If you didn't know that, you can ask any people from a generation or two ago and they'll tell you that is when dinner occurs. Pot roast is a great meal. We have a great roast and it's from Sam's Club. They came 2 in a package, so we're freezing one and we're making the other one, and this is a choice roast. You can tell it's choice because you have this little bits of fat in between the meat, in between the fibers of meat. And that's called intermuscular fat, and it's what makes the roast tender when you're done. And I would recommend not getting any roast that isn't at least choice. You probably can't find a prime roast in your grocery store, but anyways, this one came from Sam's. It's about $15 for a roast this size, $13 to $15, and it will feed more than 4 people. So that's not very much per serving, and it's not bad at all. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to salt and pepper the roast, and then I like to cover it with a little bit of flour. We're going to brown the roast, and then we'll pull the roast out, and we'll put in, and we're going to cook some onions for 2 or 3 minutes until they get translucent. For you people from Oklahoma, that means partly clear. And then we'll add in a little bit of garlic. So the first thing I like to do is I've got some kosher salt, and this is a big honkin' piece of meat. And so don't be afraid to use quite a bit of salt and quite a bit of pepper. And I like kosher salt because I can see it, number one, and number two, because the flakes are a little bit bigger, and it really makes it easier to see what you're doing. So I want to pat that in there, and I'm not going to use this hand over here again, but I'll just handle the salt separate from the pepper. I'm putting it on there first, like I said, so I can see it. I'm going to rub it in, and like I said, I don't like salty foods, but a little bit of salt won't be enough, because you've got to really get this thing covered. And so put it on the sides, on all of the pieces here, before you get started. If you've got any silver skin on your roast, or I guess extra fat, you'll want to trim that off, but this roast is in pretty good shape, and so I really didn't see any need to pull any of that off.
Looks like a pretty good roast.
It is a good roast. Luke is filming for me today.
Yep.
And
I make smoothies.
I also like to use a coarse ground black pepper. Again, and I'm trying to get salt on all of the sides. And now I've got a problem. On all of the sides of the roast, as well as the ends. So then, that's plenty of salt. We'll use pepper, and I use coarse ground black pepper. And again, because this is a big piece of meat, don't be afraid to use this. And we're going to cook it for a long time, and we're going to make a broth, kind of.
Good.
Pat that in, flip it over here, and we'll do the same thing on this side. Kind of hold it up high. We don't want to, if you get too much on there, don't worry. Just kind of rub it off, rub it around. But this is one of those times when you want to hold the shaker up kind of high, so you don't get too many globs in one spot. And again, you want some on the sides of the meat. It's not quite like a barbecue where you're gonna slow cook something on the smoker, but you do want to cover it really well. So that is good. So we're also going to flour it a little bit, and this just helps put a nice little crust on there. We will brown here in a minute. Just sprinkle it on there pretty liberally on all the sides, and you can rub that in. Some people mix the flour with the salt and pepper, but then you end up with wasted flour. There's no need for that. Anyways, cover the roast with the flour.
Walking in the winter.
You can just cover that around like this. This is optional. Some people don't do this, but this is the way I grew up with them, and this is the way I like them. I think it's pretty stinking good. What we've done is we've added about 2 or 3 tablespoons of olive oil to the bottom of our pan, our Dutch oven. The thing about Dutch ovens that's really important while we're letting that oil heat up is, is you need one that will seal up. Mine is a really nice cast iron Dutch oven. It has a lip, and you want to use one that will seal up and hold the moisture in. Some of them are aluminum, some of them are cast iron, some of them are steel, but just make sure that you can get a good seal on your oven. So we just want to make sure we have enough oil, maybe a little bit more than that, to cover the bottom of the pan. Let that get good and hot. Usually about 375 is where you want it, and 350, 375, you don't want to smoke the oil, but when you can hold your hand down about an inch over for about a second, that's when you know you're at 375, and we're not there yet. And we should get an instant sizzle there.
Ooh.
Put it in there, and I like to, press it down a little bit to make sure we're getting good contact with the surface, so we're browning it evenly.
That sounded really.
And it does take some heat, so especially on the first side, about 2, 3, 4 minutes on each side. It's 10:06. So we're starting a little late this morning, but we had a late breakfast because we had, it's Sunday morning, we're starting a little late. Ordinarily you'd want to start about, 7 or 8, so that, your roast is going to take about 3 hours to cook, and you want to let it, make sure it's done on time. Okay, so it's starting to brown. It's been on here 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to use a large fork and turn this roast over and brown the other side, and we'll get a look at that. Now that's exactly what you want to see. The flour is just browning a little bit. It's made a little crust, and we'll make sure that the oil is getting all the sides there really well. And another 2 or 3 minutes, and then we're going to pull the whole thing out. Okay.
When?
So we've cooked both sides for 2 or 3 minutes a piece. I had to turn the fire down a little bit. It's getting a little hot, but this looks really good. And we're just going to transfer this back to our cutting board, and we're going to cook these onions. So as we're adding the onions to add them right to the Dutch oven, don't do anything else. They're going to cook down, and you can see that this onion is just roughly chopped, which is all you need to do. Doesn't need to be any finer than that. And we'll just take and stir that onion around and get all the pieces covered with the olive oil that was in there. And then you can see that while there's not a lot of oil left in the pan, there's plenty enough to cover those onions. So just kind of, we'll spread those out, and we'll get them a little time to cook. And for you folks from Austin, we're going to cook these until they're translucent. And translucent means where you can see through them just a little bit. So we'll give those 3 or 4 minutes, and we'll come back. So now you can see that these are browning nicely, and they've been on here 2 or 3 minutes. Keep them stirred up, and this really smells good. Now we're going to add some garlic, and I've minced this garlic. And we don't want to add the garlic until the very end of this process, and that's because the garlic cooks so fast it will burn. Stir that in really well, and cook it for about another minute. Okay, so now we have the onion and the garlic cooked. This meat is not hot, even though we browned it a minute ago. And we're going to put that right on top of the onion. Then we're going to add beef broth. You'll hear a nice sizzle from that. Pour it over the top, pour it over the bottom, and everything will be nice and moist. And
This is
just
really good.
Beef broth from H-E-B, and we're using about half of it. I think it's 2 cups, 14 ounces, something like it. About 14 ounces. But not too full, because we don't want to boil this over. We're going to let that start to simmer. We can go ahead and turn the fire up now. And we're going to add a bay leaf. And because my bay leaves are kind of old and small, we're going to add a couple of them. And we're going to put them in the broth themselves. Don't put them on top of the meat. There's no need for that. Really will make this a savory dish. And then a little bit of thyme. Now it calls for, you can use fresh thyme. I usually don't have fresh thyme, and rosemary. But we're just gonna sprinkle a little bit. I'm actually gonna put it in my hand so I have a little bit more control.
Fresh
Still
thyme.
smells good. And we're gonna put that
Is that
also
thyme?
in the broth. And just, you know, a teaspoon or so of fresh thyme. Put a little bit around the top of the meat. Won't hurt a thing. Maybe just a little bit more. I really like it. So
Is it pronounced thyme or thyme?
I think it's called thyme. Someone will correct me, I'm sure. So,
Yep.
okay. Now we're gonna bring that to a simmer, and it's already starting to simmer a little bit, but we'll let it simmer just a bit, and we'll get our lid.
This is one big hunk of meat.
Anyways, you wanna bring that to a simmer all the way around, which that didn't take long. That's because we, have our cast iron. Now, with cast, you do have to be careful. You don't want to put really cold beef broth. If you've had it in the refrigerator in there, you may want to heat it up a little bit, or pour it in slowly, because you can crack your cast iron if you put it in there when it's too hot. So it's starting to simmer now. We're going to put the lid on it, and where it's nice and sealed. The oven is preheated to 275 degrees, and we're going to put it in the oven for 2 hours.
Whoa.
Okay, Luke has his mouth full of carrots. You gotta hold it still, son.
Oh.
All right, it's been about 2 hours, and we're gonna pull out our pot roast, and we're gonna add our vegetables. The reason we don't add the vegetables until it's cooked for 2 hours is they'll just be mushy and overcooked.
No.
So we don't want to cook those guys for 3 hours. So we just move. Move. So anyways, pull out the pot roast. And be careful, because it is heavy, and now it's heavy and really stinking hot. It's been cooking at 275 degrees, and that should be looking pretty good. It is looking pretty good.
Oh.
All right. So now we're gonna put our potatoes in here and carrots, and they just can go on top and around the edges. It will have some shrinkage. Your roast will, because it's been cooking. It's lost some water and some fat, and muscles have changed, and we're getting really full. And we're gonna add some carrots, and I'm just using I like red potatoes, but they were out because of COVID-19 and everybody's buying everything. So we're just gonna sprinkle in some carrots, and we're just using the baby carrots that are already peeled. You can buy whole carrots and use those. But we're just gonna spread them around in here where we have room. It's a little more juice than what I'd like to see. Okay, so I've reduced the amount of juice and the amount of potatoes. We had a little bit too many. And I'm gonna go ahead, everyone likes the carrots. They get nice and soft, but not too soft.
Kind of sweet.
And then we're going to just salt and pepper the vegetables a little bit before we put the lid back on. And then we'll close it back up, and we're gonna cook it for another hour to an hour and a half, which usually like an hour and 15 minutes is just about right. So just peppering the vegetables. And again, I really like pepper, and it may be too much for some of you, but you won't really notice it. It just makes it taste so good. My two favorite spices in the world are salt and pepper.
Salt is spice.
Salt, I think, is overused. Pepper is underused. So, but we're gonna put some salt and pepper on that,
Isn't salt a mineral?
and then we're gonna put the lid back on and put it back in the oven at 275 for about an hour to an hour and a half. That's fine. Okay, welcome back. It's been 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I think we'll probably be good with that. I'm gonna go ahead and try to melt my gloves. You think I may have the gloves on for COVID. I don't. The reason I wear the gloves is because this is gonna be fall apart tender at this point in time. And we are gonna need to extract the juices. Now, I don't have a turkey baster today, so we are going to take it out by hand, perhaps.
Oh.
All right, that's looking pretty delicious. Anyways, this will help us. Look, no comments necessary. It does look pretty good. So, I believe, look at a fork. It looks like the potatoes are soft. Yep, carrots will be soft. So that is great. So I'm using the gloves and a spatula to kind of hold it together because I don't want anything to hit the floor. But the roast is done. It is falling apart tender. And I don't have a separator for the gravy, but it'll be okay because in my experience, it hasn't had too much fat in it recently. And we're gonna let it separate a little bit here in this Pyrex measuring dish. And we'll pull it off and we'll use this fat. You have to have a little bit of fat to make the gravy or it won't make. Correct. We're gonna cook some flour and some grease and then we're gonna put some of this good old beef broth in there and it's got some onions left over. It's gonna be really indulgent.
When?
Okay, so we're gonna cut the meat and this is gonna be Ryan's plate, so not too big. And there's a little trim there, so we'll cut that off. As you can see, it is falling off apart. We'll put that on here, maybe a little bit more. We've already put some vegetables on there for it. Is, oh my gosh, that is gonna be so good. And then all we need to do is add a little bit of gravy. There, oh my goodness, and put a little bit over here for his potato. That is lumpy gravy. Sorry about that. We can do better next time. But that and a Sister Schubert roll, and we are good to go. So that's it. Pot roast, easy to make. It doesn't take too much prep time. Just has to be in the oven. You can do it while you're doing other things. We like to do it when we're at church on Sunday mornings. And it is a delicious meal.